The mahogany conference table gleamed, reflecting the grim faces gathered around it. Leo, usually an island of calm in his small studio apartment, felt an unfamiliar tremor in his hands. He smoothed the creases on his borrowed suit jacket, the fabric stiff and alien against his skin. Mr. Henderson, the solicitor, a man whose every utterance seemed to weigh a ton, cleared his throat. As per the last will and testament of the late Eleanor Blackwood, Mr. Henderson began, his voice dry as old parchment, all her earthly possessions, including her primary residence, Blackwood Manor, and its surrounding lands, are hereby bequeathed to her grandnephew, Leo Maxwell. A collective gasp rippled through the room. Leo's distant cousins, a collection of disapproving aunts and uncles, exchanged incredulous glances. He, Leo, the quiet artist who lived on instant noodles and dreams, had inherited Blackwood Manor. The very name conjured images of decay and whispered tales. He hadn't seen his great-aunt Eleanor in years, not since he was a small child. He'd barely known she existed. Mr. Henderson continued, oblivious to the drama unfolding around his pronouncement. It is important to note, however, that the estate carries significant liabilities. Property taxes are outstanding for the last 5 years, and the structural integrity of the manor has been compromised. Frankly, Mr. Maxwell, it is a ruin. Leo swallowed, the tremor in his hands spreading to his chest. A ruin. He knew Blackwood Manor by reputation, of course. The laughing stock, the townspeople called it, a decaying monument to a bygone era, its grandeur long since swallowed by neglect and the relentless creep of time. He'd seen the occasional blurry photo in local history books, a grand, imposing structure, now just a ghost on the hill. 2 days later, armed with a rusty key and a heavy heart, Leo drove his battered hatchback up the winding, overgrown driveway. The air grew cooler as he ascended, the scent of damp earth and something vaguely metallic filling the car. He topped the final rise, and there it was, Blackwood Manor, looming against a bruised, grey sky. It was worse than he'd imagined. The once proud facade was a tapestry of crumbling stone and boarded-up windows, like blind, hollow eyes staring out at the world. Ivy, thick as anaconda coils, strangled the walls, and the roof sagged in places, revealing jagged gaps where slate tiles had once lain. A single, rickety gargoyle perched precariously above the main entrance, its leering stone face cracked and stained, seemingly mocking his arrival. A small group of townspeople had gathered at the foot of the driveway, their faces a mixture of curiosity and thinly veiled amusement. He saw Mrs. Gable, who ran the bakery, shaking her head with a pitying smile. Old Mr. Finch, the retired farmer, guffawed, clapping his hand against his thigh. The whispers followed him, carried on the wind. Poor fool. Another one bites the dust. He'll last a week. Leo kept his gaze fixed on the manor, his cheeks burning. He understood then, with a sharp pang, why it was called the Laughing Stock. He pushed open the massive oak front door, which groaned in protest like a forgotten beast. Dust motes danced in the slivers of light, piercing through gaps in the boarded windows. The air inside was thick and stale, smelling of decay, mildew and something else. A faint, almost sweet scent, like old potpourri. The grand hall, once a place of elegant soirees, was now a cavern of shadows and echoes. A sweeping staircase, its banister splintered and loose, ascended into darkness. Plaster peeled from the high ceilings in curling strips, revealing the skeletal laths beneath. Cobwebs thick as cashmere draped from every corner, catching the faint light like spectral curtains. Leo walked through the silent, decaying rooms, each step kicking up clouds of dust. The drawing room, the dining room, the library. All were ghost-haunted shells of their former glory, filled with the shadowy outlines of forgotten furniture beneath grimy tarpaulins. Rainwater had stained the wallpaper, creating grotesque Rorschach test patterns on the walls. In one room, a single broken chandelier hung precariously, a metal skeleton stripped of its crystal adornments. He pulled out the crumpled statement Mr. Henderson had given him. The figures swam before his eyes. 5 years of back taxes, overdue utility bills for a house with no running water or electricity, the solicitor's fees, the estimated cost of immediate structural repairs. The numbers were staggering, a monstrous sum that dwarfed his meagre savings. He had enough to last a few months in his apartment, certainly not to tackle a monumental project like this. He sank onto a dusty, moth-eaten armchair in what might have been the study, its springs groaning under his weight. The silence of the manor pressed in on him, heavy and suffocating. The laughter of the townspeople still echoed in his ears. He was not just the inheritor of a ruin, he was its latest victim. The weight of it all, the sheer insurmountable scale of the decay, combined with the crushing financial burden, threatened to overwhelm him. He closed his eyes, a profound weariness settling deep in his bones. This wasn't an inheritance. It was a curse. A desperate idea. The crisp morning air did little to clear the fog from Leo's mind. Sunlight, fractured by dusty panes, illuminated motes dancing in the oppressive stillness of Blackwood Manor's grand hall. The echo of Mr. Henderson's words from yesterday still reverberated through the cavernous space. The debts are substantial, Mr. Maxwell. And the structural integrity, well, it's a miracle it still stands. Leo clutched a crumpled estimate in his hand, its numbers a dizzying spiral into financial ruin. The roof needed replacing, the east wing was collapsing, and a third of the plumbing had burst at some point in the last decade. He was an artist, not an engineer, and certainly not a deep-pocketed philanthropist. He walked through the drawing room, the once opulent wallpaper peeling like sunburnt skin, exposing the lath beneath. Every creak of the floorboards, every draught whistling through a broken window, was another nail in the coffin of his inheritance. Blackwood Manor wasn't a prize. It was an anchor dragging him down. He could sell it, of course, but who would buy a crumbling ruin burdened with more debt than its potential value? The thought of admitting defeat, of letting this last vestige of his family's history slip through his fingers, was a bitter pill. He'd never truly known his distant relative, the eccentric Lord Blackwood, but the sheer weight of this legacy felt personal. A gentle rap on the already splintered front door startled him. He found Mrs. Gable, the proprietor of the village bakery, standing on the decaying porch, a basket of fresh bread in her arm and a look of pity in her kind eyes. "Morning, dear," she said, her voice soft. "Just checking in. Heard you were still up to your ears in all this." She gestured vaguely at the manor's imposing, yet crumbling facade. Leo managed a weak smile. "Morning, Mrs. Gable. It's a lot. Indeed it is. Listen, I know it's a strange question, but my bakery oven, bless its heart, it's seen better days. I need some good, solid fire bricks for a repair. I was wondering, you wouldn't happen to have any old ones lying about, would you? From an old fireplace or something?" Leo's brow furrowed. Old bricks? He glanced back at the manor, a wild thought taking root. "I might, Mrs. Gable. Come to think of it, there's an old stable at the back that's practically rubble. Might be some usable ones there." Her face brightened. "Oh, that would be a godsend, dear. I'd be happy to pay a fair price, of course." As Mrs. Gable discussed the price of salvaged bricks, a strange, desperate idea began to form in Leo's mind. Not just bricks from the stable, but from the manor itself. The manor was dying, decaying. If he couldn't afford to save it all, perhaps he could at least salvage parts of it to finance its survival. It was a shocking, almost sacrilegious thought, yet it held a perverse logic. He could literally dismantle parts of his inheritance to save the whole. After Mrs. Gable left, her basket of bread a small comfort against the chilling reality, Leo went to the collapsing east wing. The grand fireplace in what was once a ballroom was a masterpiece of carved oak and intricate tilework. But the tiles were cracked, the oak worm eaten, and the chimney he knew was unsafe. He ran his hand over the cold stone hearth. It felt wrong, like dismantling a part of himself. But what choice did he have? The alternative was losing everything. He found an old crowbar in the stable's neglected toolshed. Its rust-pitted surface felt heavy in his hand, a tangible symbol of the brutal task ahead. He returned to the east wing, the silence of the manor pressing in on him. With a deep breath, he wedged the crowbar under a loose hearthstone. The stone groaned, then lifted with a grating shriek, revealing the rough mortar beneath. The sound echoed through the empty ballroom, a mournful cry of protest from the dying house. He wasn't just pulling up a stone. He was pulling at the very fabric of his inheritance, driven by a desperate hope that this act of destruction might, paradoxically, lead to salvation. Each removed stone, each splintered piece of wood would be a tiny victory against the encroaching ruin, a small sum towards keeping Blackwood Manor from becoming merely a ghost of its former self. The sun began its descent, casting long, skeletal shadows across the floor as Leo worked, sweat stinging his eyes. He imagined the villagers whispering, "Poor Leo," tearing his own home apart. But shame was a luxury he couldn't afford. The manor's survival, even in a diminished state, was all that mattered now. The old library's sacrifice. The dust motes danced in the lone shaft of sunlight, piercing the gloom of the old library, illuminating Leo's conflicted reflection in the dark, polished surface of a discarded book. This was it. No turning back now. His heart, usually a quiet rhythm, thumped with a frantic nervousness that echoed the tremor in his hands as he reached for the first shelf. The library, a place of hushed reverence and forgotten narratives, now felt like a mausoleum for his own burgeoning hopes. He ran a hand over the smooth, rich mahogany of a bookshelf, its grain whispering tales of generations past, of scholarly pursuits and whispered secrets. He'd admired this wood, these shelves, these silent sentinels of history since he first set foot in Blackwood. Now, he was their executioner. He started with the least offensive, the top shelf of a short, squat unit tucked away in a shadowed corner. It held only a few mildewed tomes, their spines brittle, their pages fused. With a grunt, he pulled. The wood, surprisingly resilient, resisted for a moment, then groaned in protest as the screws, ancient and rusted, gave way with a series of sharp, protesting squeals. The shelf came free, exposing rough-hewn plaster behind it. A strange cocktail of relief and remorse washed over him. Relief that it was done, that the first cut had been made. Remorse for the act itself, a desecration of something beautiful and enduring. He carefully lowered the shelf to the floor, its weight substantial, its craftsmanship undeniable. This wasn't just wood. It was history, meticulously shaped and joined. He worked systematically, his initial hesitation giving way to a grim determination. One by one, the shelves came down. The air grew thick with the scent of aged wood and disturbed dust, a fine powder settling on his hair and clothes. Each twist of the screwdriver, each metallic shriek of protesting metal, was a small death. He felt a profound sense of sadness, a dull ache beneath his ribs, as if he were amputating a part of himself. Blackwood, for all its imposing decay, had begun to feel like an extension of his own precarious existence. As the morning wore on, his hands grew sore, blisters blooming on his palms from the unfamiliar friction of tools and rough wood. Splinters, like tiny, vengeful needles, embedded themselves in his fingertips. His clothes, once relatively clean, were now streaked with grime, his face smudged with dust and sweat. Yet, with each dismantled shelf, with each stack of salvaged lumber growing beside him, a different emotion began to surface. A strange, raw sense of purpose. This wasn't just destruction. It was a desperate act of creation. He was tearing down to build up, sacrificing parts to save the whole. The thought, once sacrilegious, now felt practical, almost righteous. He wasn't giving up. He was fighting. He was fighting for Blackwood, for the legacy he hadn't asked for, but now felt responsible for. He moved to a larger unit, one that stretched from floor to ceiling, its shelves still laden with forgotten knowledge. He carefully removed the books, stacking them in neat, if dusty piles on the floor, promising himself he'd sort through them later. Perhaps some held value, or at least a story worth preserving. The sheer scale of the task began to assert itself. This wasn't a quick fix, a simple transaction. This was back-breaking labour, a testament to the sheer, stubborn endurance of the house itself. The thought of Mrs. Gable's bakery, of the warm bread and the much-needed payment fueled him. He envisioned the fire bricks, salvaged from Blackwood's dying heart, giving life to another's livelihood. It was a tangible connection, a thread of hope woven through the unravelling fabric of his own life. He pulled at a particularly stubborn section of panelling, the decorative trim refusing to yield. He gritted his teeth, his muscles burning, and yanked harder. With a sudden jarring lurch, the panel gave way, not just from its frame, but revealing something unexpected behind it. A hollow space, darker than the shadows already lurking in the room, beckoned. His breath hitched. It wasn't the rough plaster he'd grown accustomed to. This was different. This was a gap. A concealed space, too regular to be accidental. His sore hands paused, the weight of the hammer suddenly forgotten. A flicker of something beyond wood and dust stirred in the silence. The scent of dust and old paper, once a comforting blanket in the main library, now seemed to follow Leo like a ghost as he moved his operations to the forgotten study. This room was a mere fraction of the main library's size, tucked away down a short, dimly lit corridor that branched off the grand hall. Its existence had almost been forgotten, obscured by a heavy, velvet-draped door that blended seamlessly into the oak panelling. He'd only stumbled upon it while searching for an unused corner to stash his increasingly numerous tools. Here, the air was even colder, a perpetual chill emanating from a single, uncurtained window that looked out onto a neglected section of the overgrown gardens. Moonlight, when it appeared, cast long, spectral fingers across the peeling wallpaper and the solitary claw-footed desk that dominated the room's centre. Unlike the grand main library, this space felt more intimate, almost melancholic, as if it had witnessed 1,000 whispered secrets and carried the weight of each one. The shelves were less ornate, simpler, yet still held a sparse collection of leather-bound books, their titles faded into illegibility. Leo set down his pry bar, the metallic clang echoing sharply in the quiet. His shoulders ached, a deep, persistent throb that had become a familiar companion over the past weeks. The systematic deconstruction of Blackwood's heart had taken its toll, not just on his body, but on his spirit. Each splintered piece of wood, each nail wrenched free, felt like a miniature betrayal of the house he was meant to preserve. Yet, the gnawing anxiety of his precarious financial situation kept him moving, a constant, low hum beneath the surface of his thoughts. He started with the smallest bookshelf, tucked into an alcove beside a defunct fireplace. The wood here was darker, denser, resisting his efforts with a stubborn defiance that grated on his already frayed nerves. Sweat beaded on his forehead, tracing cold paths down his temples as he wrestled with a particularly unyielding plank. The rhythmic creak and groan of the old timber filled the silence, punctuated by the occasional grunt of exertion. Hours blurred into a monotonous cycle of effort and exhaustion. The moon climbed higher, casting the room in stark relief, then began its slow descent, leaving the study bathed in the grey promise of dawn. Leo paused, leaning against a half-dismantled frame, his breath coming in ragged gasps. He needed a moment, just a moment, to clear his head. His gaze drifted to the wall beside the fireplace, a stretch of unadorned panelling that seemed to absorb the meagre light. Something about it felt off. It wasn't the same rich, dark oak as the rest of the room's trim, but a slightly lighter, almost bleached shade, as if it had been exposed to more sunlight, or perhaps less. He ran a hand over its smooth surface, feeling the cool, unyielding wood beneath his fingertips. Instinct, a subtle whisper in the back of his mind, prompted him. He tapped the panelling with his knuckles, a light, almost hesitant rap. Thump. The sound was solid, unremarkable, exactly what he expected from a sturdy wall. He moved his hand a few inches to the right, tapping again. Thump. Still the same. He continued, moving along the panel, a curious rhythm forming in the quiet room. Thump, thump, thump. Then, he reached a spot directly above the mantelpiece. He tapped again. Thwack. It was subtle, barely a difference, but it was there. A hollower, slightly sharper resonance, distinct from the dull thud of the surrounding wood. His brow furrowed. He tapped again, more deliberately, focusing on the sound. Thwack, thump, thwack. There was no mistaking it. The difference was undeniable. It wasn't a structural beam, not a joist. He'd learned the sound of those well enough by now. This was something else. A space, an empty void behind the surface. A tiny spark of something new ignited within him. Not the grim determination of salvage, but a flicker of genuine curiosity. He pressed his ear against the cool wood, listening intently. Nothing. No faint drafts, no unusual echoes, just the same faint hollowness that had caught his attention. He pulled back, his eyes scanning the panelling with renewed intensity. The grain seemed to match, the joinery appeared seamless. Yet, the sound persisted. A forgotten study, a curious sound in a wall. The pieces didn't quite fit, and in Blackwood, Leo was quickly learning, things that didn't fit often hid something important. His fatigue, for a fleeting moment, receded, replaced by a quiet, burgeoning sense of intrigue. He traced the outline of the hollow-sounding section with a finger, a slow, deliberate movement. The mystery of Blackwood, it seemed, was not yet fully revealed. The hollow sound, subtle as it was, had resonated in Leo's mind long after he'd set down his hammer. It wasn't the thud of a loose board or the echo of empty space, but something more deliberate, almost a whisper of an intentional void. Returning to the study, a fresh wave of determination washed over him, momentarily eclipsing the usual dread. He ran his hand over the panelling again, pressing lightly, listening intently. The wood felt solid, unyielding, yet the memory of that distinct acoustic anomaly persisted. He retrieved his utility knife, its blade glinting under the weak sunlight, filtering through the grime-streaked window. With painstaking care, he began to score the faded floral wallpaper where he suspected the anomaly lay. The brittle paper crackled under the blade, releasing a faint, dusty scent of forgotten years. Each cut was shallow, deliberate, a surgeon's touch rather than the brute force he usually applied to his deconstruction efforts. This wasn't about tearing down, it was about revealing. The wallpaper came away in ragged strips, exposing layers of aged plaster beneath. It was a mosaic of pale greens and muted yellows, remnants of previous decorative schemes. Leo worked slowly, scraping away the crumbling plaster with the edge of a painter's spatula. Dust motes danced in the shafts of light, illuminating the tedious process. His shoulders ached, and his fingers grew stiff, but a nascent excitement, a feeling he hadn't experienced in weeks, spurred him onward. This wasn't another piece of wood destined for the scrap heap. This was a question mark, a potential answer. As more plaster flaked away, exposing the raw lath beneath, something different began to emerge. Not the uniform grid of wooden strips he expected, but a faint, almost invisible seam. It was a hairline crack, impossibly fine, running vertically through what should have been an unbroken expanse of wall. He paused, holding his breath, his heart beginning a slow, rhythmic drum against his ribs. He traced the line with a hesitant fingertip, feeling nothing but the smooth, cool plaster. Yet his eyes, now accustomed to the subtle variations in texture and shade, perceived it. He widened his scraping radius, carefully extending his work both horizontally and vertically. The initial seam soon met another, then another, forming an angular pattern that defied the typical construction of a wall. It was too precise, too geometric to be an accidental crack or a settling fissure. It suggested intention, a deliberate design. As he meticulously cleared away more of the plaster, the faint lines deepened, becoming more pronounced, more confident. He could now discern a vertical boundary that descended from what appeared to be a decorative moulding near the ceiling, reaching to the floorboards. Another line stretched horizontally, intersecting the vertical at roughly chest height, and then another near the floor. It wasn't a crack, it was an outline of a rectangle perfectly integrated into the wall's structure, camouflaged by decades of paint and paper. A gasp escaped him, a quiet exhalation of pure astonishment. It was a door. A secret door, hidden in plain sight. Its edges so perfectly mitered and its surface so flush with the surrounding wall that it had vanished into the very fabric of the room. The craftsmanship was extraordinary, a testament to a forgotten era of artistry and ingenuity. He ran his palms over the newly exposed surface, feeling the subtle raised edges where the door met the surrounding frame. It wasn't a crude, hastily constructed cubby. This was a sophisticated piece of architectural deception. His mind raced, piecing together the implications. A hidden space, concealed within Blackwood Manor. It wasn't just a hollow sound. It was an invitation. The weariness that had dogged him for weeks evaporated, replaced by an invigorating surge of curiosity. The manor, once a symbol of his crushing debt, had suddenly presented itself as a puzzle, and he, Leo Maxwell, the reluctant deconstructor, was on the verge of solving a piece of it. The weight of the world, for this fleeting moment, lifted, replaced by the thrilling, palpable anticipation of discovery. His hands, still covered in plaster dust, trembled slightly as he stared at the faint outline of the secret door, a silent promise etched into the old wall. The hidden latch. Leo's fingers traced the cool, unyielding surface of the hidden door. The illusion of seamless wood grain was so complete, so flawlessly executed, that it defied logic. He pressed, pushed, and prodded along every seam, every supposed knot in the timber, searching for any give, any faint line that might betray a hinge or a handle. The anomalous sound, which had first drawn him to this spot, was now a silent whisper in his memory, a ghost of a vibration. The air in the study felt thick, charged with the weight of unseen history, and his own breath seemed unnaturally loud in the quiet room. He ran his palm flat against the panel, feeling for temperature variations, for any subtle change in texture that his eyes might have missed. The wood was uniformly cool, dry, and unresponsive. He leaned in, his nose almost touching the surface, trying to detect the faint scent of old oil, a different varnish, anything that would indicate a moving part. Nothing. It was as if the wall itself had simply decided to fold inward, leaving no trace of its transformation. A sigh escaped his lips, a gust of air that barely disturbed the dust motes dancing in the faint light filtering through the study window. He took a step back, surveying the entire panel once more, trying to approach it with a fresh perspective. He remembered the faint click he'd heard earlier, the fleeting, almost imperceptible sound that had launched this entire investigation. That sound had to come from something. A latch, a spring, a cleverly disguised mechanism. He knelt, bringing his gaze level with the lowest edge of the hidden panel, then slowly, meticulously, began to ascend, his fingertips brushing lightly over the surface in quarter-inch increments. His eyes, now keenly attuned to the slightest deviation, scanned for anything out of place. He moved with the slow, deliberate pace of a man deciphering an ancient riddle, his artist's eye searching for the telltale signs of human intervention. The intricate carvings of oak leaves and acorns that adorned the study's panelling were uniform, each one a testament to painstaking craftsmanship. Yet, somewhere, there had to be a break in the pattern. It was almost imperceptible, hidden within the swirling grain of a larger central oak leaf, about waist-high. A tiny pinprick, no bigger than the head of a sewing needle, glinted faintly as a shaft of sunlight shifted. Leo leaned closer, his heart beginning to quicken its rhythm. It wasn't a flaw in the wood, but something inserted into it. He touched it with the tip of his finger, a cold, almost metallic sensation beneath his skin. It was flush with the wood, perfectly camouflaged, a tiny button or switch. He pressed it, gently at first, then with more conviction. Nothing. He tried wiggling it, twisting it slightly. Still nothing. Frustration, a familiar companion, began to prick at him. He pulled his hand back, staring at the minuscule point of light. There had to be a trick to it, a sequence, a specific pressure point. He recalled the faint, anomalous sound. A click. Not a grind, not a scrape, but a definitive, singular click. He repositioned his finger over the tiny pin, taking a slow, deep breath. This time, instead of pressing directly, he tried a different approach. He nudged it, sliding his fingertip over it with a firm, sweeping motion, as if trying to push it aside. Click. The sound, soft yet distinct, resonated through the silent room. It wasn't the loud, mechanical clunk he might have expected, but a gentle, almost polite acknowledgement. A tremor ran through the hidden panel, and then, with an elegant, almost silent sigh of aged wood, the door began to recede inward. It pivoted on unseen hinges, swinging back into the darkness beyond. Leo watched, mesmerized, as the black rectangle of the opening widened, slowly revealing nothing but profound shadow. The air that drifted out was cool, stagnant, carrying the faint, earthy scent of disuse and ancient dust. He stood frozen, a mix of awe and trepidation washing over him. The darkness within seemed absolute, swallowing the light from the study whole. What secrets did Blackwood Manor keep behind such a meticulously crafted veil? He took a tentative step forward, peering into the void, his mind alight with questions. The quiet hum of curiosity, once a faint spark, was now a roaring fire within him. A glimpse of the past. The air that rushed from the newly opened space was thick, cold, and utterly still, carrying the faint, earthy scent of forgotten things. Leo hesitated, a tremor running through his hand as he reached into his pocket for the box of matches he always carried for lighting his makeshift stove. His fingers, calloused from weeks of demolition, fumbled slightly before extracting a single matchstick. He struck it against the rough surface of the box, and with a rasping sound, a tiny, defiant flame flickered into existence, casting dancing shadows on the rough-hewn stone of the hidden entryway. He extended the match, its light a fragile beacon against the oppressive darkness within. The beam, though weak, was enough to pierce the gloom just beyond the threshold, revealing a compact, square room. His breath caught in his throat. This wasn't a crawl space, nor was it a dusty, forgotten closet. It was more. As his eyes adjusted and the small flame provided a touch more illumination, distinct shapes began to materialize from the shadows. Directly ahead, two sturdy wooden chests sat side by side, their dark surfaces adorned with ornate, tarnished metal clasps. To their left, a heavy, dark wood desk, its top surprisingly clear, dominated a small section of the wall. And centered on that desk, starkly visible even in the dim light, was a formidable, leather-bound book. A soft gasp escaped Leo's lips, a sound swallowed by the profound silence of the room. He took a tentative step inside, the old floorboards beneath his worn boots groaning softly, a stark contrast to the perfect preservation before him. The air here, though stale, lacked the mustiness and decay that permeated the rest of Blackwood Manor. There was no dust motes dancing in the matchlight, no cobwebs draped like spectral curtains. It was as if time itself had paused its relentless march the moment this room was sealed. He held the match higher, letting its fleeting light play over the surfaces. The chests appeared to be crafted from some dark, dense wood, possibly oak or mahogany, their corners reinforced with bands of what looked like iron. The metal clasps, though aged, gleamed faintly where the light caught them. He dared not touch them yet, afraid of disturbing the perfect tableau. His gaze lingered on the desk. It was a solid piece, built for purpose, with thick legs and a deep, polished surface that somehow retained its sheen. There were no pens, no inkwells, no scattered papers. Just the magnificent book. It was monumental, its spine thick and unyielding, covered in dark, almost black leather that seemed to absorb the scant light. The edges of its pages, even from a distance, appeared crisp and unyellowed. This wasn't just a hidden room. It was a capsule, preserved with an almost uncanny care. The realization sent a shiver down his spine, a mix of awe and a prickle of unease. Who had created this space? And why had they gone to such lengths to hide and protect it? The answer, he instinctively knew, lay within the pages of that formidable book. The match, having served its purpose, flickered precariously, shrinking rapidly. He let it burn down to his fingertips, the warmth a sharp contrast to the chill in the room, before carefully pinching out the flame. The darkness rushed back in, denser than before, but now Leo had a mental map, an imprint of what lay before him. He fumbled in his pocket again, this time extracting his phone, its flashlight beam a modern intrusion into this ancient scene. With a click, the powerful LED cut through the gloom, illuminating the room with a steady, unwavering light, revealing every breathtaking detail in sharp relief. The chests, the desk, the magnificent book, all waited, silent witnesses to a past Leo was only just beginning to uncover. His heart hammered a frantic rhythm against his ribs. This was more than salvage. This was discovery. And he had a feeling it was only the beginning. My dearest descendant. Leo's heart hammered a frantic rhythm against his ribs, a drumbeat of disbelief in the silent room. He approached the desk, his movements slow, almost reverent, as if any sudden motion might shatter the fragile reality of his discovery. The smooth, dark wood gleamed under the soft glow of his flashlight, unmarred by time. This wasn't merely old furniture. It was a museum piece, preserved in a bubble of impossible perfection. His gaze fixed on the formidable leather-bound tome at the center of the desk. Its spine was thick, the leather soft and worn, in a way that suggested countless hours of handling. Yet it was utterly free of dust. He reached out a hesitant hand, his fingers tracing the intricate, almost organic patterns embossed on the cover. It felt warm beneath his touch, a living thing in this suspended reality. Taking a deep breath, Leo wrapped his fingers around its spine and lifted it. The book was heavier than he expected, its weight substantial, ancient. He laid it flat on the desk, the soft thud echoing in the profound quiet. The clasps, forged from some dark, unidentifiable metal, were ornate, resembling intertwining serpents. With a gentle click, they sprang open under his touch, revealing pages that were surprisingly unyellowed. The paper was thick, almost vellum-like, with a texture that felt impossibly rich. The scent of old paper, not musty or decaying but clean and subtly sweet, filled his nostrils. The very first page held no title, no elaborate calligraphy. Instead, a single folded letter rested within a specially cut recess, held in place by delicate silk ribbons. The paper was a creamy ivory, distinct from the book's pages, and felt cool and crisp beneath his fingertips. He carefully unfastened the ribbons and lifted the letter. It was folded into thirds, secured with a small, unadorned wax seal. He broke the seal with a soft snap, a sound that felt deafening in the stillness, and unfolded the letter. The handwriting was a meticulously formed copperplate script, each loop and flourish executed with an almost artistic precision. It was clearly old, yet the ink was still a vibrant, rich black. His eyes scanned the opening lines, and his breath hitched. "My dearest descendant," it began. Leo frowned, a ripple of confusion running through him. A general address? Or something more specific? He continued to read, his gaze devouring the elegant script. "If you are reading this, then the passage of time has indeed brought you to this hidden chamber, just as I intended. You are, I presume, the one destined to find these words, the one burdened by the weight of Blackwood Manor, much as I was once. A shiver traced its way down Leo's spine, not of cold, but of a profound, unsettling recognition. The letter was speaking directly to him. It knew. It knew about the manor, about the weight, about the debt. How could it? He skipped down a few more lines, his eyes darting across the page, seeking more clues, more understanding. And then he saw it. A name written with an extra flourish, a signature at the bottom of the page that made his blood run cold and hot all at once. With profound hope and enduring love, Arthur Pendleton. Arthur Pendleton. The name echoed in the hollow chambers of Leo's memory. It wasn't a common name in their family, but it wasn't unknown either. His great-aunt Margaret, a repository of family lore, had mentioned him once or twice. Arthur Pendleton, the original builder of Blackwood Manor, his great-great-grandfather, the man whose portrait, a stern-faced individual with piercing eyes, still hung in the dilapidated parlour, gathering dust and judgment. Leo sank into the plush, velvet-upholstered chair behind the desk, the letter still clutched in his trembling hands. The chair smelled faintly of old leather and something else, a faint, sweet spice, like dried lavender. It was surprisingly comfortable, enveloping him in its forgotten luxury. The reality of the letter, of the room, of the entire situation pressed down on him with an almost physical weight. His great-great-grandfather had written this. For him. For Leo. A man who had lived over a century ago had anticipated this moment, had prepared for it, had left a message across the vast expanse of time, waiting for its specific recipient. The thought was staggering, almost unbelievable. It was a bridge spanning generations, a hand reaching out from the past to touch the present. His initial desperation, the gnawing anxiety of debt and demolition, began to recede, replaced by a nascent sense of wonder. The objects in the room, the chests, the desk, the book itself, were no longer just antique curiosities. They were pieces of a puzzle, meticulously arranged, deliberately preserved. And the letter, addressed specifically to "my dearest descendant," was the first, most crucial clue. It was an invitation, a solemn vow from the past, promising answers, promising revelation. And Leo, with a quiet determination he hadn't known he possessed, felt an undeniable pull to unravel every single thread of this extraordinary mystery. The demolition could wait. This, whatever this was, felt infinitely more important. The secret fortune. Leo's fingers trembled, tracing the elegant cursive on the aged parchment. The paper, almost translucent with time, crackled softly under his touch. His great-great-grandfather, Arthur Pendleton, had not only anticipated his arrival, but had seemingly orchestrated the very circumstances that led him to this moment. The flickering oil lamp cast dancing shadows, making the words on the page seem to breathe with an ancient life. "My dearest Leo," the letter began, the familiarity sending a strange shiver down his spine. "If you are reading this, it means you have faced the burden of Blackwood Manor, just as I knew you would. It means you have felt the sting of its decline, the weight of expectation, and the bitter taste of necessity. I know, my boy, because I felt it too." Leo swallowed hard, a lump forming in his throat. He could almost hear a gentle, knowing voice echoing through the silent chamber. What you perceive as a burden, Leo, is in fact a crucible. Blackwood Manor, in its apparent decay, served a vital purpose: to guard a secret and to prepare its true heir. For generations, this estate, and indeed our family, has been the unwitting custodian of a fortune. Not merely gold or jewels, though those are here in abundance, but a legacy far more profound. This wealth, amassed through ingenuity and a touch of daring, was never meant for lavish display or frivolous spending. It was intended to safeguard something far greater, something that will, in time, reveal itself to you. Leo's eyes darted around the pristine room, suddenly seeing it with new vision. The polished wood of the desk, the untouched books, the quiet dignity of the space. It wasn't just preserved, it was protected. He thought of the dusty, crumbling rooms he'd been dismantling, the splintered floorboards, the sagging ceilings. The contrast was stark, almost cruel. Yet the letter explained it. The state of Blackwood Manor, its gradual deterioration, was a deliberate, agonizing choice. It was a shield, a deterrent. A grand, opulent house draws too much attention, too many prying eyes. A decaying relic, scorned and forgotten, invites only ridicule and neglect. This neglect, my dear Leo, was its greatest protection, allowing the true heart of the manor to remain undisturbed, hidden in plain sight. A wave of understanding, cold and sharp, washed over Leo. The ridicule he'd endured, the whispers of Blackwood's folly. It had all been part of the plan. The debt, the desperation that had forced his hand to salvage, to tear down, to expose. It was the final, necessary step. He had been compelled by circumstance to do precisely what was needed to uncover this hidden truth. I knew that only true desperation, the kind that forces one to look beyond the superficial, would lead you to this chamber. Only by dismantling the outer shell could you discover the core. The very act of creative destruction was the key, the final puzzle piece in a generations-long game. Forgive me the hardship, my boy. There was no other way to ensure the secret remained safe until the true moment, until the right hands discovered it. Tears pricked Leo's eyes, not of sadness, but of a profound, almost overwhelming sense of destiny. His life, which had felt so adrift, so defined by failure and burden, suddenly snapped into sharp focus. Every struggle, every difficult decision, every swing of the hammer had been leading him here, to this exact spot, to this revelation. He wasn't just an artist burdened by debt. He was the chosen heir of a hidden legacy, tasked with an unknown purpose. He continued to read, the words flowing like a river, carrying him further into Arthur's world. Within this room, you will find the initial provisions to begin your journey. The bulk of the fortune, however, is not here. It is scattered, hidden in plain sight within the manor's architecture, requiring a keen eye and a patient spirit to uncover. Each discovery will lead you closer to the true purpose of our lineage, to the reason Blackwood Manor was built, and to the profound secret it guards. You are not merely an inheritor, Leo. You are a keeper, a protector, and ultimately a discoverer of something far greater than gold. The letter ended with a flourish, signed simply, Arthur Pendleton. Your great-great-grandfather and your first guide. Leo lowered the letter, his gaze sweeping the room once more. It wasn't just a secret room anymore, it was a launch pad. The weight on his shoulders hadn't vanished, but it had transformed. The burden of Blackwood Manor was no longer a crushing debt, but a compelling quest. His life had just turned inside out, and for the first time in a very long time, Leo felt a thrill of anticipation. A quiet, resolute strength blooming in his chest. His purpose, once vague and elusive, now shone with an undeniable, luminous clarity. Jewels and purpose. Leo's fingers trembled, tracing the elegant script of Arthur's letter. The revelation of a deliberate deception, a carefully orchestrated performance of decay, spun through his mind. He looked around the pristine chamber, the dust motes dancing in the single shaft of sunlight from the hidden skylight. Every antique, every carefully chosen book, now resonated with a deeper meaning. This wasn't just a room. It was a stage, set centuries ago for a final, solitary audience. The letter mentioned a true inheritance, something more tangible than the hidden space itself. His gaze fell upon the mahogany desk, its surface gleaming despite the years. He knelt, his eyes scanning the underside, searching for a latch or a hidden compartment. His fingers brushed against a small, almost invisible brass button nestled beneath the lip of the desk. He pressed it. With a soft click, a shallow drawer, no bigger than a shoebox, eased open from the desk's underside, its presence utterly concealed. Heart pounding, Leo pulled it out. It was heavy, far heavier than its size suggested. He set it on the polished wood of the desk and lifted the lid. A gasp escaped him, a quiet, reverent sound. The box was filled with a dazzling array of precious stones. Emeralds the colour of deep forest, rubies like droplets of frozen blood, sapphires shimmering with ocean depths. They lay nestled among stacks of old gold coins, each one thick and satisfyingly weighty, glinting with a soft, ancient lustre. Beneath these, bundled with care, were crisp parchment scrolls and thick envelopes sealed with wax. He picked up a gold coin, turning it over in his palm. It felt ancient, imbued with the touch of countless hands, each transaction a silent whisper of history. This was the true wealth, not just enough to clear his debts, but a fortune, a profound, almost unfathomable fortune, preserved, waiting. He returned to the letter, his eyes scanning for more, for an explanation of this extraordinary treasure. Arthur's elegant hand continued. This inheritance, Leo, is not merely for your comfort, though it will undoubtedly provide that. It is the fuel for a grander vision, one that has been nurtured within the walls of Blackwood for generations. My dream, a dream passed down from my father and his father before him, was to transform this manor into a beacon of enlightenment. A place where young minds, especially those from challenging circumstances, could flourish without the burdens of the outside world. A children's learning centre, Leo. A sanctuary of knowledge, creativity, and boundless curiosity. Leo's breath hitched. He reread the words, his mind struggling to reconcile the crumbling, debt-ridden house he knew with this noble, almost ethereal vision. Blackwood Manor, a children's learning centre. The grand, echoing halls, once so lonely, now filled with laughter and the eager chatter of young voices. The sprawling, overgrown gardens transformed into vibrant spaces for exploration and play. The funds you have uncovered, the letter continued, are precisely for this purpose. They are to restore Blackwood not to its former glory as a private residence, but to its true, intended glory as a haven for learning. The documents within the box detail the architectural plans I commissioned, the curriculum outline I painstakingly developed, even the names of scholars I once hoped would lend their expertise. This was my life's work, Leo, and now it is yours. Tears welled in Leo's eyes, hot and unexpected. They weren't tears of sadness, but of overwhelming emotion, a potent cocktail of relief, purpose, and profound gratitude. He had spent his life feeling adrift, an artist struggling to find his voice amidst the din of financial anxiety. He'd seen Blackwood as a burden, a monument to a past he couldn't escape. Now, in the quiet glow of this hidden room, he understood. His great-great-grandfather hadn't just left him wealth. He had left him a profound, undeniable purpose. The weight on his shoulders, the crushing pressure of debt and impending homelessness, lifted, replaced by a new kind of weight, the weight of responsibility, of a legacy, of a dream centuries in the making. He was no longer just Leo Maxwell, the struggling artist. He was the chosen heir, the protector of a vision, the inheritor of Blackwood's true destiny. He looked down at the glittering jewels, the ancient coins, the carefully preserved plans. This was not the end of his struggle, but the glorious, unexpected beginning of something far greater. The manor wasn't just old wood and stone. It was a living, breathing testament to a dream, and now that dream was his to bring to life. A new vision. The crisp morning air, redolent with damp earth and distant pine, streamed through the manor's shattered windows. Sunlight, no longer an unwelcome spotlight on peeling wallpaper, now painted cheerful stripes across the dusty floors. Leo, a lukewarm mug clasped in his hand, traversed Blackwood Manor. It was no longer the decaying structure he'd been systematically dismantling, but a vessel seen through the clarifying prism of Arthur's unwavering vision. Yesterday's crushing weight of debt and artistic stagnation had evaporated, replaced by a lightness he hadn't known since childhood. The vast fortune, sparkling jewels nestled in velvet, glinting gold coins, ancient documents, had transmuted from mere wealth into powerful instruments for transformation. He paused in the grand entrance, where a massive cobweb draped from the chandelier like a forgotten shroud. Before, he'd seen only the daunting task of endless repairs, the inevitable demolition. Now, he envisioned children's laughter echoing, their excited footsteps on polished wood. Vibrant artwork, perhaps some of his own, would adorn these walls, complementing Arthur's intricate designs. The grand staircase, its banister splintered, no longer whispered of decay, but sang of potential. A central artery for a bustling hub of young minds. Moving into the formal dining room, the gaping hole in the ceiling, a casualty of his salvage work, now seemed less like damage and more like an aperture. Light streamed in, illuminating dancing dust motes. This space, he mused, could be a reading nook, a quiet corner filled with beanbag chairs and colourful books. The damaged floorboards, once a hazard, now represented a blank canvas for a new, sturdy foundation. He ran his hand over exposed brick in the kitchen, feeling its rough texture. The initial despair, the gnawing anxiety of repair costs, were distant, muted echoes. Arthur's meticulous planning, his foresight to secure a future for generations, filled Leo with profound awe and responsibility. He wasn't merely fixing a house, he was nurturing a dream, an extension of Arthur's will, a steward of a legacy far grander than he could have conceived. A palpable connection to his great-great-grandfather stretched across time, a silent conversation, a shared understanding of Blackwood Manor's true destiny. The laughing stock, as locals called it, had symbolized his inherited misfortune, a constant reminder of financial struggles and sacrificed artistic dreams. Now, the very phrase brought a subtle smile to his lips. They were laughing at a facade, at the brilliantly executed illusion Arthur had crafted. Blackwood Manor wasn't a ruin. It was a cocoon, protecting a profound purpose. The laughter, he realized, would eventually fade, replaced by the joyful sounds of learning, the eager chatter of children discovering new worlds within its walls. He walked through the empty rooms, his footsteps echoing softly. Each space, no matter how dilapidated, now sparked a cascade of ideas. The overgrown garden outside, a tangled wilderness, would become a vibrant outdoor classroom, a place for young hands to tend plants and observe nature. The long-abandoned stables could transform into an art studio, a haven where aspiring young artists could discover their passions. He even considered creating a small performance space, perhaps in the old ballroom, for plays and musical recitals. The weight of this inheritance was immense, yet it was a burden he welcomed, a weight of purpose rather than despair. He thought of the intricate mechanisms of the secret room, the precision of Arthur's engineering, and felt a surge of energy. This wasn't about personal comfort or luxury. It was about building something meaningful, something that would resonate for generations, just as Arthur had intended. Leo returned to the study, the room where the truth had been unveiled. He sat at the heavy oak desk, his fingers tracing the worn wood. The documents, neatly stacked, represented not just instructions, but a covenant. He would honour it. He would transform Blackwood Manor, not into an elegant estate, but into a beacon of knowledge and imagination. The laughingstock would become a testament to foresight, resilience, and the enduring power of a multi-generational dream. Hope bloomed in his chest, a vibrant, unwavering flame. He had a mission, a grand design to unfold, and he was ready. The scent of sawdust and fresh plaster began to replace the musty odour of decay that had permeated Blackwood Manor for decades. Leo, armed with Arthur Pendleton's meticulously detailed blueprints and his own burgeoning vision, had wasted no time. The first step was finding the right people. He placed ads in the local paper, eschewing the online world for the tangible feel of newsprint, just as Arthur might have. He needed artisans, not just contractors. Clara Jenkins was the first to answer. Her small, weathered hands, stained with what looked like old paint and varnish, clutched a worn portfolio. Her eyes, sharp and assessing, swept over Leo and then the cavernous entrance hall. "Heard you were looking for someone who knows their way around historic homes," she stated, her voice surprisingly soft for her sturdy demeanour. "I specialise in period restoration carpentry, done work on the old town hall and the library before they modernised it to death." Leo felt an immediate sense of trust. He laid out Arthur's plans, the elegant, hand-drawn schematics detailing everything from the curve of a banister to the dimensions of an art studio. Clara's gaze sharpened, her finger tracing the lines with reverence. "These aren't just plans, Mr. Maxwell," she murmured, looking up at him with a glimmer of excitement. "These are a vision. A dream, really." She glanced around the dilapidated space, a corner of her lip twitching. A very ambitious dream, given the current state of affairs. Leo merely smiled, a quiet confidence settling over him that surprised even himself. "I believe in ambitious dreams, Ms. Jenkins, and I have the resources to see this one through." Clara's initial skepticism slowly melted into genuine enthusiasm as Leo outlined the purpose of each planned room. A vibrant art studio where children could unleash their imaginations, a quiet library filled with stories, performance spaces for budding actors. She signed on immediately, bringing with her a network of local craftspeople, a stonemason whose family had worked on the manor's original foundations, a plasterer renowned for intricate ceiling work, and a team of painters who understood the subtle art of colour-matching historical palettes. The manor, once a silent monument to decline, began to hum with activity. The rhythmic thud of hammers, the whine of saws, and the cheerful chatter of the crew echoed through its revitalized corridors. Scaffolding rose like intricate metal trees, reaching up to repair crumbling cornices. Sunlight, once obscured by grime, now streamed through newly cleaned windows, illuminating dust motes dancing in the air, a tiny, energetic ballet of progress. News of the transformation spread like wildfire through the town. Initially it was met with disbelief. Blackwood Manor, the laughingstock, was being restored? For children? The local diner, a central hub for gossip, buzzed with speculation. The usual jokes about Leo's inherited white elephant faded, replaced by murmurs of wonder and curiosity. Cars slowed as they passed the manor gates, drivers craning their necks to catch a glimpse of the scaffolding and the steady stream of work vans. The derelict estate, once a symbol of neglect, was rapidly becoming a beacon of hope and renewed purpose. One blustery afternoon, a familiar black sedan pulled up the gravel drive. Mr. Henderson, the structural assessor and debt collector, who had once delivered the crushing news of the manor's insolvency, emerged, looking conspicuously out of place amidst the construction chaos. His usual crisp suit seemed too formal for the scene, his polished shoes scuffing on loose debris. He found Leo in what was to be the main art studio, discussing colour swatches with Clara. The room, though still under heavy renovation, already pulsed with a latent energy. Paint cans lined the walls, and a large, newly installed window flooded the space with light. "Maxwell," Mr. Henderson said, his voice betraying a hint of surprise. "I heard rumours. Thought I'd see for myself." He gestured vaguely at the bustling activity outside, his brow furrowed. "Quite the operation you've got going here. And new windows?" Leo turned, a small, knowing smile playing on his lips. "Mr. Henderson, yes, quite. It seems Blackwood Manor has a new lease on life. And a new purpose." He watched the man's eyes dart around, taking in the freshly plastered walls, the careful restoration work. The air, thick with the smell of wood and paint, was a stark contrast to the stale decay Henderson remembered. "I must admit, Maxwell," Henderson continued, a rare note of genuine astonishment in his voice, "when I last spoke with you, your prospect seemed considerably less vibrant. And the debts—" He trailed off, remembering the astronomical figures. "The debts have been settled, Mr. Henderson," Leo stated calmly, meeting the assessor's gaze. "And the manor's structural integrity, I'm pleased to report, is now more than sound. In fact, it's going to be magnificent." He gestured towards Clara, who gave a brief, polite nod. "We're not just rebuilding a house, Mr. Henderson. We're rebuilding a dream." Mr. Henderson, for once, seemed speechless. He simply nodded, his eyes still wide with surprise, before turning to walk slowly back to his car, the sounds of hammers and saws following him, echoing the profound shift that had taken root at Blackwood Manor. The laughingstock was laughing no more. Home. Finally. The air, a delightful blend of fresh-baked bread and the subtle sweetness of new wood and polished brass, hummed with renewal. It was a sensory antidote to the musty decay that had once clung to Blackwood Manor. Today, the grand house wasn't merely renovated, it pulsated with new life. Bright, uninhibited laughter from children cascaded through the foyer, echoing off the intricate plasterwork Clara Jenkins and her team had meticulously restored. Tiny feet now danced across gleaming oak, unhampered by the former hazards of loose boards. Sunlight, fractured into vibrant kaleidoscopes by the newly cleaned stained glass windows, painted the walls where only dust motes once cavorted in gloom. Leo surveyed the scene from the newly repaired porch, the solid timber beneath his boots a testament to months of relentless effort. A quiet smile touched his lips as Lily Chen, a blur of red ribbons, chased a gaggle of younger children across the sprawling lawn. The once wild landscape now teemed with joyous activity, featuring swings, a wooden fort, and a winding path to a small enclosed garden ripe for budding botanists. Lily, with her infectious curiosity and boundless energy, had been a frequent welcome presence during the final stages, her spontaneous questions often sparking innovative ideas for the learning centre. "Mr. Leo, look!" she shrieked, proudly displaying a particularly impressive dandelion clock. "It's ready to tell wishes." Leo chuckled, waving back. He recalled her first appearance, a timid peek through a gap in the construction fence, her eyes wide with a mixture of apprehension and wonder. Now they sparkled with unbridled delight. This vibrant tableau, he realized, was Arthur Pendleton's dream, finally taking flight. Inside the former ballroom, now the main art studio, buzzed. Easels stood poised, canvases gleamed under updated lighting, and pots of vibrant paints awaited small hands. The old library, once a trove of forgotten knowledge, had been reimagined as a storytelling room, its walls adorned with whimsical murals depicting classic fairy tales. The grand dining room, where generations of Blackwoods had hosted lavish feasts, was now a communal kitchen, designed for cooking classes and community meals. Mrs. Gable, whose bakery had received a generous donation of salvaged fire bricks for a new oven, had promised the first batch of opening day pastries. A profound sense of belonging settled over Leo, a warmth radiating from his chest, permeating every fibre. For so long he had drifted, an artist without a definitive canvas, a man without a true anchor. His old apartment had been a temporary haven, his studio a place of solitary creation. Blackwood Manor, in its dilapidated state, had initially felt like an overwhelming burden, a task he'd resented. Yet, as he'd peeled back layers of neglect, uncovering Arthur's elaborate blueprint, he'd discovered not just a legacy, but a profound purpose. He wasn't merely restoring a house, he was building a future. He wasn't just settling debts, he was investing in a burgeoning community. Blackwood Manor's transformation mirrored his own. The quiet, overwhelmed artist who had once contemplated abandoning it all had given way to someone grounded, purposeful, and deeply content. A gentle breeze stirred, carrying the distant scent of pine from the surrounding woods. He closed his eyes for a moment, envisioning Arthur, his great-great-grandfather, a man he'd never met but now understood so intimately. He pictured Arthur standing on this very spot, dreaming precisely this scene. Children's laughter, vibrant activity, a beacon of learning and hope. This wasn't just a children's learning centre. It was, finally, a home. Not only for the children who would learn and grow within its walls, but for Leo himself. The world's crushing weight, a constant companion, had finally lifted. The gnawing anxiety of financial strain and the burden of expectation had dissipated. In their place, a lightness, a freedom, blossomed from knowing he was exactly where he was meant to be, doing exactly what he was meant to do. He was an heir, yes, but more importantly, a steward. a guardian of a dream stretching across generations. He opened his eyes, the vibrant scene before him a testament to perseverance and vision. Lily Chen, still clutching her dandelion, skipped towards him, her face radiant. "Mr. Leo, can we plant flowers in the garden now? Really, really bright ones." Leo knelt, meeting her earnest gaze. "Absolutely, Lily," he said, his voice imbued with a quiet joy. "As many as you like. We'll make sure Blackwood Manor is always blooming." And as he watched her race back to her friends, a clear, unequivocal thought settled in his mind. He was home.